So they're recolonizing us and setting us up for this slaughter where our men go demoralized, in disgust, etc., and just go off to just kill because what else you got, and you're angry. But what happens in that, when you do that, when you kill indiscriminately like that, you would eradicate your own numbers.
Getting to the point then about the position of young men, and you're talking about Nick Fuentes or some of the stuff that like Tucker Carlson's kind of like drifting on the Nick Fuentes stuff or vibing on that. I also see a great danger in that. Homer Simpson, Al Bundy, like all of these tropes that have built up into the culture, the mainstream culture is hostile to them. And that's the problem, is that there are great truths that are also being packaged in with a wrong call to action.
V and Cowboy host a phenomenal show with Xoaquin Flores and EM Burlingame. Enjoy the show here at ESW.
And we're live.
Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. No matter where in the heck in the world you are, it's V the Gorilla with my main man, Cowboy. And we are here with two gentlemen that need no introduction. Of course, I am talking about Xoaquin Flores as well as EM Burlingame back again. And look, guys, these guys are absolutely some of the sharpest minds in the game and understand the geopolitics, the geoeconomics, as well as the societal changes that are taking place in the Western world and throughout the world. So I want to thank both of you guys for being on. And with that being said, good morning, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Morning.
Morning. Doing good.
Hey, before we get too far, though, just understand these guys, both their information is going to be in the description so you can find them. And if you guys want to tell us really quick, and we'll start with EM here, where can we find you if we want to contact you?
Yeah, EM, you can go to the website, emburlingame.com, or EM Burlingame on Twitter, or Substack, emburlingame.substack.com. If you absolutely need to, might take a couple of days to get to, but you can go to info@emburlingame.com as well.
And XF.
Just Google me and you'll see shit. And Telegram @New Resistance is where I'm going to be posting things that I'm looking at. So it might not always be like my own comment, but I'll maybe include one, but some news event that I'm tracking. So I put the things on the channel on Telegram, New Resistance, that I'm tracking. So it's that's the best way. And other than that, like when it comes to on a Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, you just type my name in, because I do mostly like collabs and interviewed by other folks. So I don't maintain my own channels on YouTube and shit like that.
Well, I mean, I spend a lot of time. Of course, EM, I know you personally. We have a lot of conversations. And Xoaquin, I spend how many hours a week like listening to your streams and actually being there and participating. Both of you guys have amazing work. Of course, Xoaquin, I've been following you for, I don't know, more than half a decade. So
yeah, wow, yeah,
time flies, man.
Yeah, it does. Wow.
Like you and the receipts coming through on your Telegram channel are out of control. So I'll spend more time glazing you guys later. But I just want to like kick it off. So what we're seeing here is an interesting trend in the United States. And we covered this a little bit yesterday with EM on the show. And if you missed yesterday's show, then you're stupid, because it was an amazing show with EM show. on our show here. And V, you were there like the whole time. In fact, V, you had to close it. I had to bounce right at the end. But long story short, there's an interesting movement going on in the U.S. You all have heard of guys like Nick Fuentes, who I think is got to be on somebody's payroll, but he can make I don't know whose it is, because he can make a really good case that he's not.
He's not.
We're seeing a kind of a radicalizing. What's that?
He doesn't have to be on somebody's payroll. That's the problem today. He just has to be promoted by the algorithm such that he gets paid by those platforms.
Well, and see, that's the thing, though, is that he doesn't have any deals with any platforms. So that
he doesn't have to. All he has to do is monetize it. That's the thing, right? In today's world, you have plausible deniability because you don't have to be on somebody's. This is the direct progression of the Praetorian Guard. This is how they do it. You don't have to be on their payroll anymore. You just have to monetize your social media, and then they do behind the scenes, the algorithms, right? Promote you, and you get paid quite well.
Yeah, and there's some arguments there as far as people being kind of shadow banned, people being promoted quietly behind the scenes by certain powers. The cases can be made that there is a payroll, and then cases can be made that it's organic, and we could go into that. But I think there are more interesting things to talk about because between the two of you, and V, by the way, you're right up there with these guys. You know, I'm just the guy who pretends to know shit. I look at charts all day.
I'm a fry cook by day. So
You're what?
I'm a fry cook by day.
Fry. I thought you worked at like Best Buy or something.
Humans? Are you fry cooking humans?
No, just French fries.
Oh,
Good Lord. Freaking took a dark turn. You're cooking humans? Like, what?
the human, well, the intelligence world, right? You know, yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Early out here, very early in the morning. Yeah.
All right. Oh boy. So this is where like I think the two of you can have a really interesting conversation around, and this again plays into yesterday's talk about what is right, what is left when it comes to political stuff. When we're talking about a guy like Nick Fuentes, and of course he has a lot of things to say with which a lot of people agree who are not crazy or are not radicalized. And of course that's how you radicalize people, right? You bring them in with things that you do agree with, and then you make a little twist, and all of a sudden, you know, they're like doing this Roman salute. So that said, this kind of left-right paradigm, that's a dialectic. It's a game that gets played. And I'm curious to know what your guys' opinion is with regard to this. And again, EM, we kind of talked about this yesterday a little bit. So there's a framework. So I'm going to ask you to kind of kick it off and then just kind of go back and forth with it.
Yeah. So the last 3 days I wrote 3 pieces about, excuse me, about what is actually the right versus the left, as I've just kind of come to this, you know, recently actually to really think about this, focus on it. And 99.999% of what we are taught is the right is actually still all on the left. Because anything that has to do with, you know, anything that is structured and organized institutionally is by its nature collectivist. And that places it on the left. So then what is the actual right? And there's a reason for this, particularly with these Groypers, right? And death threats and other things that have come in the last few days. What is the actual right? Well, the actual right is your civilization. It's your culture, your civilization, your people, it's your history. Those things can't be codified in institutions. Institutions come and go in that. And so, you know, what has happened to you radicalize young men and then lead them to their death in and around institutions. But by their nature, over the last 300 plus years since Westphalia and the Inglorious Revolution, all of those institutions have been on the left. And so men in particular who think we're shifting back towards the actual right, you know, back towards what we're supposed to be conserving, and then go and kill and die in great numbers for this, like the Ukrainian men, 2 million, nearly 2 million of them right now, are dying for a lie. They're not preserving, excuse me, their culture, their society, their civilization. They're dying for institutions, and all those institutions are still on the left because by their very nature, institutions are collectivist and therefore on the left.
Right. Joaquin.
I was on mute there. Yeah, Joaquin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, it's a very interesting take. You know, I mean, it kind of boils down to how one defines words. And then, you know, you have to have, when you're defining words, there's going to be the definition and the contrast. Like on a TV, the old TVs with the knobs, you got to have definition and contrast. So if a word has a circular definition, or if it doesn't allow you to properly contrast it to something, if it can be everything, then it's also kind of nothing. I would say that going back 300-ish years. We're talking about the rise of modernity. We're talking about the rise of techno-industrial structures of scale made possible by the first and second and then third industrial revolutions. And it's, to me, more of a secondary or tertiary question, what the ideology is, if we call it left, if we call it right, if it's called nationalist, socialist, capitalist, anarchist, whatever. These are all modern concepts that rise with early modernity through modernity, liberalism, Burkean liberal conservatism, socialism, fascism, anarchism, idealisms and realisms are, all within in the modern context, this modernity. And I don't know that there's an alternative to that history. I mean, from a very linear perspective, one could easily say that you can't even coherently pose counterfactual histories. We can just look at what happened and understand it. And I think the more that we understand it, the more that we answer each question on the chain of causality going backwards, in that regress, we find that each thing that happened kind of had to happen that way. So it's more interesting to me to understand why what happened than to judge what happened or to cast a moral or ethical net over the past. I'm more interested in why what happened was necessary to happen. So, but when it comes to like ideologies and belief systems and stuff and left and right, like for sure, like everything that we call conservative within modernity, I would definitely concur with EM that this is actually liberal conservative. Like you can talk about Burkean liberal conservatism, and that's really distinct from arch conservatism, which is pre-modern, which gets into, at least in Western European history, although there's analogs globally, you're going to be talking about, feudalism and monarchism and, arch conservatism in this historical sense, of which we should never confuse with Burkean liberal conservatism, which is all within this rubric. So I think we have agreement there. Where I might part or introduce, problems of the discursive framework, lexicon, categories, taxonomy, or what have you, is going to arise when we start to define or try to distinguish, collectivism from peoples, from civilizations. I think that's where it gets a little murkier, or, but again, I'm not, read or immersed in my colleague's work as such, EM, but I would, I'll let him speak for himself, of course, but I would just say thematically for my own part, the words don't bother me so long as we're using them consistently. Socialism doesn't bother me, capitalism doesn't bother me, collectivism doesn't bother me. We can problematize those. I don't look at solutions, I look at trade-offs. So I guess it would be hard for me to articulate an alternative to modernity along this line of contingency of causality and the irrationality of the proposition of counterfactual histories. What happened is what happened. And I see it more deterministic, the relationship between the rise of technology, mass industry, and then that, governing structures, which we can trace back to, early pre-antiquity, pre-civilizational, tribal organization of man. Obviously, there were elders, there were warriors, there were people that had more authority in a tribe or a small human collective than others. They weren't horizontal, they weren't anarchist in that sense, but they were probably more free in many ways, but also they were free to encounter the dangers of nature, so, you're not really free when you're constrained by, you're living by the seasons, you're living by but maybe that's also a freedom, or maybe there's a freedom in submitting to that. So it's many interesting philosophical questions about man's journey through time, man against nature, man against, man, and finally man against himself.
Man, that was awesome.
My concern. So my concern is the ways in which words are used to drive young men to their ruin. And specifically in this framing of the use of these words, and yet words are just words. They're symbolic structures. They have no inherent meaning to themselves, but what we give them. But my concern is that I am listening to the use of words, and I have watched over the last 40 plus years, 50 plus for my life, but really the last 40 years specifically, young men being demoralized, marginalized, and made despondent, and then driven into a place of disgust, just as happened almost exactly a century ago, around the argument of conservatism, right? The right, nationalism specifically is the key phrase. And when that happened the last time, 7 million German men died, only a tiny fraction of which were National Socialists. And I'm listening and watching the very same thing happen to our boys now. And it concerns me greatly, because I don't want our young men to go who've been destroyed over a couple generations. I don't want them to be radicalized as they are being quite blatantly. And I don't want to see them rush off to some useless slaughter that destroys them and us. So at some point, certain words do actually, right, in that time and place, right, in the context, do actually have, we do actually have to be careful about the interpretations of, and I'll give you a prime example. You're a former military guy yourself, right? There's a certain point to where in a fight, an actual fight, where it's going to get physical, with fists or guns, where I need to make a determination about the meaning of, I actually have to stop, and I need to take very careful, I need to be very careful about the words that are being used, because depending on where it goes next, I'm either going to throw fists or I'm going to shoot somebody or be on the receiving side of. And so we're in a place right now, we're getting rapidly forced into a place to where we actually do have to take certain words and certain phrases and certain concepts and certain ideological ideas very seriously, because we're going to have to physically act upon them.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of interesting things that are occurring within the Western world itself. There's here in the United States, and Joaquin, you've seen this here in the US, you've seen this in Europe. There's a lot of push and pull from all sorts of areas. And I think right now there's such a everybody with all these ideologies and whatnot are pulling in all sorts of different directions. And you have a lot of young men that are getting confused, a lot of angst, a lot of anger. People are finger pointing here and there. Oh no, it's this group, it's that group, it's this, and everybody's blaming each other. Meanwhile, the power structure is still intact. The power structure eventually is trying to win on the other side of this. I think they know they're in the midst of a collapse. They're just trying to fish for the winning narrative, so to speak. Their approved winning narrative, so that they can control and cajole from behind the scenes to whatever the next outcome is that's going to happen here in the United States. Joaquin, now based upon that, we've seen a lot of drama occur, especially the past few weeks with Maduro, now with the whole Greenland situation that Trump just spoke over at the World Economic Forum, I think it was, with the Davos crowd, lambasting the Davos crowd. Watnick also lambasted the Davos crowd as well. I see this complete bifurcation between the United States and Europe, and how do you guys see this playing out? And Joaquin, I'll go with you first, and then EM, we can follow up with this. How will this breakup look like? This bifurcation between the EU and the wild card here is the UK and the crown countries that are with them, and then we have us, the United States. How do you guys see this playing out, and how is this affecting and what are the invisible hands you guys see that are pushing and pulling at the various populations of young men who are so frustrated and angry? So Joaquin, you first, man.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, so really that's two things and how to connect those. So so we saw the World Economic Forum. I watched it. Most of the interesting parts, or the most interesting speakers, Trump was very interesting. I find him highly entertaining and very funny. I think he's a brilliant comedian. Wonderful timing. Most of the time, he's just on point with the comedy, and he delivers it so dry, and the irony is so rich. And I think it might even go over some people's heads, but it's if you're tuned in, it's just endless entertainment. But more fundamentally, I see that in the general history of empires, generally, when we observe that they're expanding, one of the driving forces of that expansion is that it's kind of organized like a multi-level marketing scheme, and so it's actually deteriorating from the inside, and so they're having to grow and grow just to maintain the baseline inside of the core, and you will observe the core kind of hollowing out or deteriorating or decaying from the inside. So you can imagine like the streets in poverty in Rome, while the Romans are occupying Egypt or the Balkans or England and so forth, right? So as it's expanding, that's already like the cancer, right? And the collapse is already kind of a foregone conclusion. Now we're in this process today of like, how do we reorganize the empire? It's, I would say, in collapse in a sense, but obviously if you have some degree of foresight, you see the iceberg coming. Can you steer it in time? Vance recently made a kind of a silly analogy. He said, you can't steer the Titanic overnight or so. It didn't make sense because the Titanic wasn't successfully steered, or, setting aside theories of the sabotage, but, it hit the iceberg and went down. So it was kind of a misplaced analogy. And we said, bro, say the thing. Say Rome was not built in a day, not that the Titanic wasn't corrected in a day or whatever. So I see that definitely. Every time you have an empire in this process of actual visible decline, you already have an inter-elite conflict that's well boiled up and underway. That's going to take the form of like lawfare. It's going to take the form of like extra legal, extrajudicial activity, splits within the intelligence service. We find in the history of looking at security studies from a historical perspective. So I take that into account when I'm looking at this, and what I find is that it would actually be an exception to the rule and not obvious, if there was an empire that was having a crisis and there wasn't an inter-elite conflict. So that's what I see on display in the World Economic Forum, is this inter-elite conflict within transatlanticism. And it brings to light older and longer standing, and you can say organic and real existing divisions and rifts that have always been there. But when everyone's making money together, like that kind of smooths everything over. But when it's time to be like, oh no, who owes what? And where can we cut corners? Then people start fighting. It's like victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat is a fucking bastard. So I think everyone's not blaming each other. But getting to the point then about the position of young men, and you're talking about like Nick Fuentes or some of the stuff that like Tucker Carlson's kind of like drifting on the Nick Fuentes stuff or vibing on that. I also see a great danger in that. I would also concur again with EM on this as well. And the discursive framework, the words and all these things are very important. They have a meaning. The way that they're using the words, leads towards certain beliefs, and those beliefs lead towards certain actions. So we can't separate like ideas, words from actions, you know? Like if I say, look, there's a fucking fire there, like that means like get up, put it out, run away. It's not just an observation of fucking curiosity. So I absolutely concur with his point there. And I think it's interesting, you know, there was in The Handmaid's Tale, Hulu series that was funded or produced by Hillary Clinton. Interestingly, they actually go biographically into the roots of some of the characters that become some of the evil guys of this, what is it, Christian nationalist theocratic state, right? Mm-hmm. And it's exactly this young man's burden. You've got the woke culture, you've got the feministicized culture, you've got the culture of, you know, you watch commercials on TV in the United States. Huge difference from when I moved to Serbia and saw the culture wasn't like that in television commercials. But you have like some fat, lazy fucking dad on a couch with potato chips and he's a fucking slob. And the woman, the wife walks in and she knows best. She's the smart one. She's the one with like the job even or whatever. And she's like, oh, you fucking idiot, you know, Homer Simpson, Al Bundy, like all of these tropes that have built up into the culture that really demoralize men, don't give them a, you know, it's obviously the culture is hostile, like the mainstream culture is hostile to them. You know, there was, anyway, so to the point, the degree to which this is a social construction. Like, is this just an accident, or is you know, is there an intentionality behind this, or is it a perfect storm? And I don't think that's an either or. It's, you know, you're surfing human nature. It's a both and. But yeah, there's great danger in it. There are truths, you know, and that's the problem, is that there are great truths that are also being packaged in with a wrong call to action. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah. Well, 99, you know. Not a Christian, you know, I went to Christian schools and boarding schools and all of that. But so, you know, to use the devil as an example, right? Maybe not directly applicable, but 99.999% of what the devil says is true. But that 0.001% leads us all to our doom, right?
Right.
So the book I wrote, The Financialist Kill Chain, you know, we have been set up, you know, I believe very firmly that Germany was taken down in the last century, and we, the English-speaking peoples, so the United Kingdom, you know, what are the Five Eyes, were set up at the time to be the next, you know, great peoples that were taken down, whose assets would be stolen to recollateralize this financialist system. And okay, what do you need to do? You have to remove the young men, because in contract law, you have to take physical possession. And if the young men, you know, men writ large, but really the young men say no physically, well, you can't take possession of all those trillions of dollars of assets. And so I suspect that this has been done for over a century. Mm-hmm. Setting, you know, in our time, you know, the Strauss and Howe theory, you know, saeculum, the crisis phase of the saeculum. But if you look there in the English speaking world specifically, there's 5 saeculums in a great cycle every 400 years. Well, what do you need to do? You need to get the native sons to go off and to go die in vast numbers in some great conflict, internal conflict or external conflict. Right? What people don't understand is that the United States is bigger than all of Europe and the UK combined, plus some. Mm-hmm. It is itself a continent, you know, continent-sized kind of peoples. We could have a civil war here in the United States that goes on for 5 to 8 years. It kills tens of millions. So how do you get young men into that place? How do you get them into that, or enough of them, not all of them, right? But how do you get enough of them into that frame of mind?
Yeah. I mean, you create as much racial, societal, class divisions as much as possible.
Let's see, our friend Gus Demas put it pretty well. He said it never goes well to see 25-year-old men with no prospects, not getting laid, and sober.
Well, it's even worse, not getting laid in a time when you have OnlyFans and Pornhub.
Yeah, which increases the mental psychosis.
The wrath, right?
Yeah.
The wrath. It's like, well, wait, there's all these whores, and I can't meet one of them, and I don't, right?
Right.
Well,
So I'll
this
tell
is
you what.
exactly what was done to the Germans, right? German men starting the
Flooded
1918.
with pornography right during the fall of Germany.
Yeah. And
they talk
the
about burning
Bohemian
books.
era, right?
You know, what books were they burning, I wonder?
Oh, you're talking about the Roaring 20s in Germany and Weimar Germany.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of it now. Now they killed Charlie Kirk, the moderate, the one that could have been the voice of moderation. And so now all we have is radicalization, and that's this Groypers shit.
Yeah.
Which has just come after me and my family personally directly with death threats.
Yeah, tell that story for those who might not have heard it, EM.
Posted a photo of my mixed race daughter, right? And got a lot of hate. Responded the next day with a comment that that a whole lot of us special operations guys and intel guys have mixed race kids.
Yep.
We've been all over the world. We've done all kinds of things, right? We how do you win hearts and minds? You create some of your own, right? And so then I had got death threats directed publicly, openly directed against my daughter and her friend and myself, with photos, actual real photos, not AI generated, of beheaded kids.
It's fucking sick.
And they all had this Groyper tag in, not all of them, but many of them had this Groyper tag or connections, etc. And we've been disambiguating, for people who can look that word up. We've been figuring out who they are and finding out who they are, because that's the other crazy thing is go ahead and pick a fight with a former intel special operations guy thinking you're anonymous. Right?
Yeah.
But the point is that none of that, none of the things directed to us were good, right? The thing is that I realized how angry and because these were people, these weren't bots.
Mm-hmm.
People did this, humans, right? And I realized how far we are down the radicalization path, the very same radicalization path that led to the death of 7 million German men almost exactly a century ago. Right here in America.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking all these higher things and these abstractions and all of these, elucidation of the problem in great detail. I don't believe that from people I talk to and, et cetera, I don't think we realize how close we are already to the precipice. This isn't an abstraction.
Yeah.
It killed Charlie Kirk. It tried to kill Trump. It's been directed against me and others that I know. Now, today. Right? So I don't know what the answer is. I'm 58 years old, right? I'm older Gen X, right? I'm not a millennial. I'm not a Gen Z. I've got 2 Gen Zs in my house, right? They're amazing. It's an amazing generation. They're working this stuff out, but they got to survive. Right. So we can talk all the abstractions and all the elucidation of the problem. What we really need to do is think that we are in 1930s something Germany right now already. Yeah. Probably 38, maybe 1939. We're there. And then the question becomes one of, are we going to repeat that? Are we going to be the Germans now? Because, oh, by the way, English-speaking peoples are Germanic, right? Rome hates us.
Yeah. Indeed.
Me and V Gorilla here not feeling so Germanic, but we're with you. Well,
yeah, I'm actually quite Roman.
White Roman over here, yeah. But
although my Roman history comes from the very, very southern tip of Sicily. So
I call him the Sicilian scallion.
Yeah, we're not. I'm not just Sicilian, but
my daughter's godparents are from Calabria. So yeah.
It's, I mean, like we were conquered by everybody from the Moors to the Vikings. So
actually, Sicily was freed by Normans, by us Germanic peoples, right? That's another thing that people don't realize is that a whole lot of the papal states and etc. were brought in Norse Normans, Scandinavian Vikings to free them from Islam, and then to rule and govern them for quite some time.
Well, and that actually could weave back into what we're talking about, because Sicily is an interesting place. One of the theories about why the mafia kind of occurred there was because of that repeated conquering being the stepstone to Europe. So all these large civilizations came in and they would conquer, and then they would just kind of move on. And so we would have these absentee landlords under which developed a sort of a surreptitious or clandestine set of laws that were, in effect, governing. And that's what we would call the mafia, or whatever you want to call it. They don't really call it the mafia over there, but so, it makes you wonder, like, in the current technological society, will there be room for such local self-governance, if you will?
I would say yes. I'm not that worried about the direction of like currencies and central control. I think I think people self-organize, like, if people will start using fucking dates, anything that has a shelf life, anything that has a value, people will use. And I think a lot of the media sphere that's pumping up fear about currency control and all this is creating a dialectic, a PRS type of scenario, problem, reaction, solution. And I have a lot of optimism in human nature. I think it's good generally. And human self-organization, I think, normally does the job. And I know we're all still here until we're not. But if past performance is any indicator of, future performance, then I think we'll get through this. And so I likewise, I have a couple of kids, and likewise, I also see, that they're quite capable and different from some of us. So in a good way. So, yeah.
I was telling EM that although our paths are quite different, or the way we were raised were quite different, there are some convergence in our stories. We're very close in age. Our kids are close in age. We're from the same area. We both have similarities in our families, and we both married Serbs.
Yeah. Small world. Yeah.
Small world. I guess EM, we gotta, not to say that one thing is better than the other, but I recommend Eastern European women personally.
Well, I've written on this, actually in the novel that I'm writing, and then a couple of pieces on the future power of Slavic women, because with 2 million Slavic men dead in the last 3 years, Slavic women, if done right, are the future of Europe and the European peoples. That's immense power. Now, will they be allowed to realize that and recognize it? I don't know. Right? But I've been writing about it. Quite literally, European women, the elite European women, don't realize that they have completely handed themselves to what they consider their enemy. Slavic women.
Can you elaborate on that? How did they hand themselves to?
Well, they themselves stopped having children for 2 generations, 2.5 generations, and they just killed off in a useless, stupid, bloody war 2 million Slavic men.
Right.
So now you have some of the most attractive, intelligent, well-balanced, little bit crazy, women, and dangerously crazy women in the world who have no future husbands in their own culture and society and world. Over 1 million of them. So where are they going to go? What are they going to do? They're going to just be without a husband or future fathers of their children? Or are they going to figure out how to help them? And this gets back to the conversation, the young men and the radicalization of young men, right? The most powerful way to de-radicalize young men is find them a wife. Find them a wife. That's like the most extraordinary way to de-radicalize a young man who's had no hope and no options in life. That he was radicalized in the first place because he thought he would never have a wife, never, have a mother for his children. Well, we just got over 1 million Slavic women now, beautiful, extraordinary women, that if they would find and, seek out and find Western men, non-Slavic Western men, that would de-radicalize a whole lot of young men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you look at different cultures and you look at crises in history. I think we were just talking about Weimar Germany and the parallels. Male access to reproduction is like in the most clinical sense. If you deprive them of that, you're going to get Allahu Akbar, you're going to get a lot of things. You're going to get weird versions and forms of Christian so-called nationalism. You're going to get, but it's interesting is that from that same milieu and speaking the same truths, not in a top-down way, but in the way which, actually modern communication allows, like very horizontal. Many individuals that have answers can give answers and can mentor young men. There's so much misinformation and hopelessness among young men that are dealing with so many issues sociologically, economically, but also in terms of the toxicity of foods and hormone blockers or pseudo estrogens that are actually diminishing their drives in many ways that are not healthy. You're getting increase in, like the old Alex Jones thing, gay frogs, right? So you've got...
You're making the frogs gay.
So you've got, this is a crisis. It's a health crisis. It's a mental health crisis. It's a reproductive crisis. It's a social crisis. So then it's like, well, and it's difficult because there's kind of two ways in advice that can both mitigate the radicalism, but one is more in the direction of how to succeed at monogamy, and the other is kind of more like lad culture. Austin Powers, it's more, how to succeed in a kind of an inverse of feminism.
It's the Tate brothers. It's the Tate brothers. That's why they're promoting. They're put out there.
Yeah, which is kind of fortunately passe. Like, fortunately, that's like almost, what was that guy? The guy who pretended that he had gambling earnings, but it was just an inheritance from his father, Dan Balzerian or something.
Balzerian, I think.
I didn't know that about his story.
Yeah, remember that guy? So that was like that 2015 period, 2013. When it was still like the answer was that, and now I see more like people are getting into religion, philosophy, personal discipline, respect. There's like a growing respect culture, and it's like, how do you respect women? You can't respect women from the Dan Balzerian, Tate brothers, fake Muslim, whatever bullshit like thing going on. Like, imagine becoming a Muslim just for the polyamory. Like, come on. So, like,
didn't Tate convert to Islam?
That's for the polygamy. He's not like a virtuous person who teaches good things about how to be, though. He's still a fucking dickhead. So, like, what you find is there's been a pivot, and I think that's very good. But again, it's not like there aren't devious minds that are, trying to twist that somewhere as well. I mean, there's a lot of mechanisms, but I'm not fatalistic about it. There are conspiracies, but there are limits to conspiracies. A lot of things are perfect storms and surfing events that develop. The degree to which the events can be contrived can be great in some arenas, but the outcomes of those can be less predictable than maybe people talk in their own book about it. Like, in other words, those who are engineering these things might have more self-assurances about the outcomes that can be delivered. And of course, and when they're selling that to governments, or when they're selling that to corporations, or they are the governments and corporations, they may have a false belief in how those might succeed. And therein lies, our opportunity. Therein lies, the silver lining of that cloud. So yeah.
If I might, on that one, I'm involved in a men's empowerment group, and it has a full spectrum between, guys who are religious, guys who are not. And it evolved out of a sort of a lad culture group. And then there was a split. And now the newest focus, at least in this group, isn't about how women suck or, the Western women are terrible, like all this complaining about women. It's about, as men, what are you going to do to improve yourself, to make yourself attractive to women? Like, how are you going to, like, it's not about women or their problems. It's about you sucking, and you need to stop sucking. Like, I mean that, not in a weird way.
Women are hypergamous at their basic core, and that's about status. And men have to earn status, and men can only earn real status in the world of men, amongst men, not in the world of women. Right.
Oh boy.
And this is the key. And this might be a good place to go in the conversation. But what I wanted to mention about this is that the way that this group in particular is doing things, and I'm a little involved. It's not that involved right now, but long story short, it is getting away from this other business that we've been seeing. And I think that showing men what to do in the current culture is important, and a big part of it has to do with the food. You were just talking about this a moment ago with the gay frogs and all that.
It's not so much the food, actually. The real fundamental problem is that aerosolized estrogen regulates testosterone production in males, and vast numbers of women are on the pill, so they're aerosolizing vast amounts of estrogen. And so the substantive number of males are walking around completely unconsciously, these deep biological wiring, thinking that all the women around them are pregnant. And so what does that do? It downregulates testosterone, physically downregulates testosterone production in the males, and it makes the males more compliant, more protective, shall we say, of the women. Because by nature, in a tribe, in a small setting or in a family, et cetera, when the woman's pregnant, the males are more protective. That woman's bearing a child. So
you get the white knights from, and apparently women on birth control also will select for slightly more feminine features.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, by the way, and they'll marry the guy, and then, by the way, once they're off the pill, they'll divorce the guy because they're not attracted to him. So, most of what's happening is completely unconscious and completely something out of the control, conscious control of both men and women. And it all comes down to the pill and which is, by the way, just given to girls now once they hit puberty, basically. Well, that's regulating everything, because the truth of the matter is, in all mammalian species, by the way, estrogen regulates everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Right? So, okay. How do you, go ahead.
I was going to ask, and I want to go back to where you were just going to go, EM. So please bookmark that. Yeah. How's the prevalence of that over there, XF, in where you're at? Is birth control heavily, I know you may not know this, but how's the culture over there with that? The birth control, I mean.
It's probably gone up a little more in recent years, but overall it's less promoted. It's definitely available, but it's less promoted in the culture.
and a lot of things are very different in the culture. Actually, it's a very different culture, and I can see that the change is going in the Western direction over time. I knew that when I moved here that I was, in a sense, purchasing like time travel of maybe 15 years, 20 years at tops. And, but I understood that probably, you know, the nothingness, you know, like in the never ending story with Atreyu, that the nothingness would, you know, start to, you know, encroach upon us, which it has. But then this happens, then you have the SMO in Ukraine, you have Russia really kind of as a stronger counterbalance than it was when I moved here 15 years ago. And their culture is, they, you know, again, birth control is available in Russia. A lot of girls are on it, but fewer than in Western society. So you have, it is a problem. Like, for example, I was hearing, you know, the football fans have like a yelp, you know, whoa, you know, and you hear it. And I hear it today, and you look at reel from 10, 15 years ago, and it was like a full
octave.
I don't know the term,
yeah.
deeper,
Octave lower.
you know,
Yeah.
It was a full octave deeper. It's like a baritone now, and it used to be a deep bass. And I mean, but in America, it's like a tenor, just to be clear. So we've gone from deep bass to baritone, and hopefully we can, you know, reverse things here. But it's a huge difference. I mean, like, women are much more feminine, men are much more masculine. The gender dimorphism is off the charts. You know, like, dudes are like shoulders, women are like hips. You know, it's fucking nuts. You know,
Dude,
like,
I have this cousins, my wife's cousins, really, and these two kids are like in their early 20s, and they're just these like young strapping studs. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Excuse my language.
right?
You know what's going on over here? Like, we have all these, not that. But yeah, it's, I mean, my wife was raised here. Her parents are from there, and they came here back when it was Yugoslavia, but she didn't do birth control either. So, you know, I don't know how cultural that is in that sense, but
I mean, I know, like, so like my wife, I'm not going to get too personal, but she's like never been on it, never touched the stuff. And, you know, she can say the same for any number of her friends. So that tells you a lot. Like, you could, you know, 4 or 5 friends, maybe one has been on it.
yeah.
You know?
And then there's the side effect of, you know, women are going to be much more careful with who they sleep with.
They do. What you find in Serbia is maybe people have had a couple of boyfriends and girlfriends, but it's easy to fall in love because everyone is very healthy and attractive. So people meet when they're like 17 or 21, and they live together for a couple years, and then eventually they get pregnant, and then they have like a shotgun marriage. When the girl's like 2-3 months pregnant, when she finds out, they plan a marriage, and maybe she's 3-4 months when they get married, and that's kind of the norm. You kind of cohabitate, and you're using condoms, maybe you're pulling out, but then eventually you get pregnant, and then you get married. And that's what happens. And that's the country, you know, and
but that's historically accurate for all peoples.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So give me 1 second here, guys. I'm terribly sorry. I'm gonna have to go in a moment, but I am concerned historically that our young men are being led here in America specifically, right? In the English speaking world, particularly, are being led. We're in the late stages of, you know, not Weimar, but Nazi Germany, where the young men have been conditioned and pushed into a place, not all, of course, but a substantive number, into a great conflagration where they are actually a very real danger to us and the world. And I don't know exactly. I'm working on it as much as I can, but it is a very real danger that we have, that it goes beyond the ideological conversations and arguments and the historical conversations, etc. There is a vast number of men, not just young men, we need to stop doing that, but men in the West, you know, the West, who are furious And we need to take that seriously. We need to really look at that and really put energy and effort and time into that, not as an abstraction.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's when you have one of the problems, like in the United States, is I think a lack of a culture for young men. And there's two ways to look at it. I mean, you don't want to oversimplify it, but I mean, there's something kind of feminine in the first place about government, in a sense. There's some kind of feminine energy implicit in,
collectivism is feminine.
There is an aspect. Yeah, there's an aspect. Yeah. There's a strong feminine aspect in collectivism, so to speak, in government. But you have the idea of like a hall monitor or a teacher's pet. Like when women are acting like women, would you say, oh, they're women? When men act like that, we say, don't be a fucking bitch, dude. Stop being a fucking bitch. The conflation of, a real crime versus a technical infraction. Like men know the difference between, real crimes and technical infractions. Women seem not to know the difference by default, or there's some other convention that they're adhering to. I would like to see more men in elementary schools as teachers, more straight, men, maybe people that were military going into, primary education. It felt like I had some really good, my favorite teachers were men growing up. And I went to public, elementary school, and, that they could, when two kids are fighting, or if one kid takes the other kid's thing, like it matters who it belonged to. And female teachers don't think the property matters. They don't think that it matters who it belongs. You're both wrong that you were fighting. And who's right is the authority, right? Whereas
I watched my daughter stand up for other kids, and then the principal and the teachers attacked her.
Right.
My daughter, not even the son, but my daughter stood up, right? She grew up with Green Berets at war. She stood up for people, and the whole system turned on her.
Very good.
Right up to the principal of the school, and all of which, without exception, except for one, were all females, all women.
Yeah. So there's this problem, and I think that would be, a good part. But all of these are longer term solutions. But if we're talking like right now, that we're like in a 1938, 1939, Poland is about to be fucking annexed, pivot, that raises very many interesting questions. I would, what I'm looking at is the question of population decontrol and where the elites are on those questions. And I think that if we were to have this conversation 10 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago, we would say that there was unanimity among Western elites to like go the direction of the Club of Rome protocols of reducing world population to between 500 million and 2 billion people globally. But I think in contrast to when you look at how the Chinese have understood the population question, they reversed course away from population control. Now they've gotten rid of the cap on children. They're trying to promote the growth of their own middle class. I've been impressed with things that XJP is doing towards that. I have, of course, criticisms, but it's not my society to, criticize in depth. I stay in my lane. Like we have enough problems at home, but I feel like that this is an important thing to understand, that that if you see technology as a force multiplier and you still see the human as the unit which can multiply that force, then, and if that's how things are going to actually be for the next 50 or 100 years, then maybe we've kicked the crisis down the road a little bit, because maybe there's a growing consensus among elites that actually you're going to be stronger with a higher population, not a lower one. Our prior thinking, our globalist thinking was wrong. Now we have a world in fracture. Competition So maybe your competitive or profitable index increases with an increased population augmented by machines. I also think that there's a latent understanding that much of the hype around AI is speculative and market driven, but that bubble will, burst at a certain point, and the true limits of language modules, so-called AI, will be realized, and I think much sooner than a lot of the people talk in their own book would imagine or want us to believe. So for those reasons, I know this is like my line, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. Sorry. Yeah.
If I might, EM, can you just talk? First of all, EM, say what you might have wanted to say before I interrupted you. But if you don't have anything else, the thermodynamics conversation might fit in really well here as far as the limits of AI and.
Yeah, my doctoral studies are in computational engineering, AI, and I focus specifically on multivariate sentiment analysis and data brokerage, right? And how that impacts data brokerage. We don't have AI. We're not even remotely.
You're talking about sentiment analysis in terms of big data analytics, or?
Yes. So behavioral modeling from big data, right?
Sure.
How close are we? What computational requirements are necessary to actually be able to, not so much collect the data, but be able to, on a multivariate way, compute the data, right? To something that's actually usable. So on a thermodynamic, and I've written several things on the Panopticon Con and the Great Deception, et cetera, but on a thermodynamics basis alone, AI, as we're doing it, is impossible. It's impossible. The human body is composed of roughly, there's estimates 30 to 100 trillion cells, and then, 4 to 5 times that amount in your biome, on your skin, in your sinuses, and then in your gut, right? Well, every single one of those cells does more computations, hardcore computations in a second than all of Earth's computational capacities combined. One cell. There's hundreds of trillions in your body. So on a thermodynamics basis alone, right? Conservation of energy, so laws of thermodynamics, conservation of energy, and Maxwell's equations, the way in which we're trying to do AI is impossible. It's quite literally impossible.
The cost or the availability of energy is not there.
Correct. Well, and it's not so much the energy availability, because we can get to a type 1 civilization where we can use all of the available, the Kardashev scale, right? We can do that.
Yeah.
Right. But what nobody talks about there is heat dissipation.
Right.
Right. So on a thermodynamics basis alone, it's not so much about, it is about the computational side of things. It's actually about the heat dissipation related to the physical, at the physical layer, reading and writing to a hard drive, sending electrons around a circuit board, et cetera. On a heat basis alone, we can't handle the thermodynamics necessary to do the computations that we say we can do. I built data centers. That was what I did in fintech. And then my first tech company was, high-end data centers. We can't dissipate the heat physically, right? So you can talk all this fancy AI, computational, LLM, algorithm stuff, et cetera.
Yeah.
At a physical level, we can't get rid of the heat.
Right, I understand that problem. It's anyone who's overclocked the graphics card could
there you go.
That,
like the high-end gamers, right? They have to have liquid cooled freaking graphics, right? And what does it do? It doesn't, because again, what is heat? It's energy. Energy is not destroyed. It just has to be converted or displaced.
Yes.
Well, what happens when you're trying to cool something? You're actually creating more heat.
Inside, you're insulating. Actually.
You're just moving it somewhere else. So at a thermodynamics level, AI, as we're doing it, is not possible specifically for all the other arguments of computation and algorithmic complexity, et cetera. But on a heat dissipation level alone, it's not possible.
That's right. You would need something more like photosynthesis or biological, and this is 500 years out or 1,000 years out.
Correct. The human body, and the cell, eukaryotic cells in the human body are operating at about 98.6. For me, Scandinavians, we're actually 1 to 2 degrees cooler. So I'm normally about 96.7 degrees average, right?
Yeah, me too.
So we're running high end, full on 4.5 billion years of, biological computation at about 98.6 degrees, for most human beings, right? What we do in data centers, or as you were talking about in your computer, is well over 100 degrees, right? We're not even close. So again, not to belabor a point, right? But
maybe it would help people to explain why it is that multiplying the number of units that have that limit does not solve the problem.
No, in fact, it makes it again, just on a heat dissipation level alone, it makes it fundamentally worse.
Yeah, you're spiraling up.
You're spiraling up, right? So now the argument in the conversation is, well, we're going to put the processors in space. Literally, that's the conversation that's being had. We're going to put these up in space. We're going to dissipate out the heat out into space. Okay, so maybe you deal with the heat issue, right? But now you got all kinds of other issues, and more importantly, now you get down to the fundamental issue, which is that the algorithmic portfolios we use to do this supposed AI are idiots. They're infinitesimally, the intelligence level of our greatest computational models is infinitesimal compared to a single cell in the human body.
Yes.
Infinitesimal. Right? Now there's
talking about cognitive functions. We're just talking about the complexity of the signals of the
correct.
biological functions at the cellular level.
Correct. We're just talking about, cellular computation, right? Which is chemical computation, it's environmental computation, etc. Right? We're not even talking cognition, etc. Right? That's a whole other conversation. So, so very much to what you're saying, right? The escape vector that was planned by the elites of AI and the singularity, right? It's not going to happen.
Right.
My mentor, by the way, was one of Ray Kurzweil's top guys for a long time, recruited by Ray decades and decades ago, straight out of school, out of college. The escape vectors that we thought we were going to have, we're going to upload into the machine. Not possible. Not even remotely possible. Right. Okay, that one's gone.
That was like Elon Musk's talking about the uploading consciousness into a mainframe at some point.
It's not possible. It's not even remotely possible.
The question itself hasn't even been broached the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So now that's one. The other one is we're going to do genetic modifications. Well, it turns out, look at Dr. Michael Levin and Nick Lane, et cetera. Genes aren't actually that important. Genes only code for how do you produce a protein, and then there's further information about on the genetic train there, or on the genome there. There are the other parts of the genome are not garbage. They're just additional information. If you have to produce this protein under these circumstances, which occurred 3 billion years ago, here's what you have to do. Turns out genes.
You're saying that what had previously been believed to be junk DNA is not so-called junk DNA, but in fact critical for other parts of it.
Correct. What it is it's further information about, okay, if you have to produce this protein and these are the environmental conditions that you're in, here's how you adapt your protein synthesis process in order to actually produce that protein. That's complex folded molecule protein, right? So it turns out genetics are not really that important. They're not the blueprint that we thought they were. Turns out the bioelectric field is. Thank you. Right? 1 second, guys. What's that? Okay. Can you take I don't know where it is, but yeah. Give me a second, guys. All right.
You're saying genetics aren't as important as we.
Yeah, they're not as important. So that's not that's not another vector that we're going to escape, right?
Important in terms of what? Because clearly, like phenotypic.
You're not going to be able to create superhumans. Yeah, Yeah, you're not going to be able to genetically modify human beings such that they're superhumans that live forever.
Understood. Okay,
Right.
Got it.
Okay, so that's the other one, and then
It's like the transhumanist,
space.
or it's just a
Yeah, the transhumanist thing, right? And then the other one, the other escape vector that they were planning on was space. We're going to be a multi-planetary, space-bearing, a space-based race. Turns out that's not possible. Turns out every cell in our body needs Earth's electromagnetic field and gravity to function.
Yeah, look at the health catastrophes encountered by the astronauts just in near Earth orbit. I mean, even at the level of the bone density and the blood flow, how gravity operates on our vascular system, muscle. It's there's something very special about this planet for sure.
Yes. Yeah. So
it almost becomes a religious conversation, and the three of us are on definitely different sides of that. I'm a skeptic. EM, you have different beliefs. I don't want to speak for you. And Xoaquin, I know you're definitely on the believer side of things. So you begin to wonder, like, where all that fits.
I wasn't born that way, but I became that way. So
yeah. Well, I was raised in the Catholic Church heavy-handedly, like, not in a bad, forceful way though.
Sure.
And I became a skeptic as I got older.
That tends to happen. Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of respect for the Orthodox faith, right? I have an Orthodox Bible over there, and I've come to that later in life. I went to Catholic schools, boarding schools. I went to Seventh-day Adventist schools, right? But back to the point, right? The escape vectors that the elites thought they were going to have that would justify radicalizing our young men to some final great slaughter. Those escape vectors are not possible.
Yes.
They're just not possible.
In Hawaii was Zuckerberg building this underground base to survive a nuclear war.
All right. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go use a thermal sensor. I'm going to go find your air vents. I'm going to put concrete in them, and you're never going to get out of that bunker. And now your $500 billion of wealth is just completely invalidated. Your power in the world is completely invalidated because you're in a tomb you'll never get out of.
Yeah, the survivalists that, hoarding resources or cash or gold, it's like, no, dude, like, it's in those situations, it's the charismatic people that can lead ideological or practical groups of men with guns. Like it's like, that's what's actually how it goes down. Anyone who studies the subject.
So that's the fear, that is the concern I have right now, is that the really, truly powerful, malevolent, powerful people, the resentfuls, as I write about in my book, The Eternal War, they know this. They've never had any of these illusions about these things. And so they've been radicalizing our young men in all of Europe and all of the English-speaking world to one great final cataclysmic slaughter of others and self. And we're there. It was just quite literally turned on me in the last couple of days through social media, publicly and openly, including direct messages, etc. But I mean, quote tweeting. Yes. With photos of beheaded kids.
That's so
not
awful.
AI generated, but actual no shit ISIS. This was ISIS. I know where the photo comes from, right? Okay. We're there. All of these things and all these conversations that we're having are not abstractions. They're not, things that maybe one day are going to, no. We're actually here. And okay, so what do we do with the conversation, the narratives that we're having, if and when we recognize that, no, this isn't a possibility. We're here. It's taken 60 years of careful work on their part to get us here. We are here. Okay. Yes, I am also an optimist. I know some of us are going to survive. I will, most likely, barring some extraordinary things, because I come from a certain background and community, and I'm going to be good, right? Maybe, depending on what happens in the broader world, what happens with the broader number, you send a certain number of people against me, I'm not going to stay. I can't survive that. You send a certain number of men against me over a period of time, I'm not going to be able to survive that either. Unless I'm part of a community and we can sustain and we can endure and we can go on. This is the thing about, like you were saying with the bunker, right? Okay. There's a whole lot of people, wealthy people, even people I know that are not wealthy, but are, guys that went off the grid and all of that. You might survive one gunfight.
Right.
Are you going to be able to survive gunfights every month for 5 years till this all burns out?
It's you're holding on to something that everyone else wants, and you've got an individualist, like survivalist, like small group, and the larger groups with guns are just going to go around picking off the survivalists, that are also, those survivalists are welded to silos, grain silos. Those survivalists are welded to physical locations.
You're fixed in a place.
They're fixed in a place, and where, roving groups of guys like Mad Max, and shit, like that's more, my bets are on those guys in that situation.
Well, and let's do another thing, right? A whole lot of people think that when it comes to the utmost, when you've got a lot of young men who are, or not just young men, we need to stop saying that, men that are furious and have no options and no other choice. Do people really think that you're going to be able to buy, no matter the price, the security necessary to preserve you across 5-8 years until this all burns out?
Yeah, no way. That's not how human beings even function.
More importantly, do you think the guys that are actually, the few guys that are actually capable of this kind of thing, even across that period of time, are going to do it for crypto or Bitcoin?
Right. Like, where are you going to even get that from? Like, imagine power is out. Like, I mean,
well, and then people talk about the Lightning Network and it's off grid and you can do it through radios and all of this. It's like, right? It's like, do you know any high level PMC, private military contractor that does anything, the real things in anything other than gold or silver, physical gold or silver? Not even dollars.
It has to be tangible. You need tangible.
It has to be tangible.
Main point.
So, not to go down I didn't necessarily think to go down this pathway, but we are at a place where men are on the verge of, late 1930s Germany, where they're willing to just go slaughter. And it's right here in our own country, in our own place. We're not going to get World War III. No, I got to give it to, the boomers and the few silent still around, and the ones that are backing and supporting them. They are taking, to their credit, right, Xi and Putin and Trump, and they're just representative of power structures, right? So I don't mean them personally, but them personally as well, are taking World War III off the table. Does that mean that all of this wrath and rage that's been intentionally built up in men over the last 60 years is just somehow miraculously going to go away? It's just going to evaporate?
I mean, think about family law. Look, the crisis of family law in Western countries, education, employment, human resources, management. Like, a lot of these things have been designed in such a way to create not just like personal feelings and societal wide feelings of disappointment and rage, but then it's also it's gendered. It's like directed at women, or it's directed at people that are taking their jobs. Maybe it's immigrants, maybe it's women, maybe it's older people living longer that refuse to fucking retire. I mean, it's you can go ageism, sexism, you can go nationalism, or
whatever the outlet is, right? Whatever the outlet that they can point it to, it is important, but not really important. What's important is the 60 years of intentionally created wrath. That doesn't just go away.
You would say it's roughly 60 years that were
About 60 years. Really took off in the 1960s.
Okay, I follow.
Right. And accelerated, of course, in the last 10 years, 20 years, right? But it really started in the 1960s. This is the book I wrote, The Financial Skill Chain. This was all intentionally done. The English speaking world was set up next for collapse and abandonment. This is an ancient pattern.
Are you familiar with some of the writings of Sheikh Imran Hussein? He's he's an Islamic Sufi, a type of Sufi. He's an Islamic eschatologist, but he's a sheikh. He's a religious man. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times, interviewing him. He talks about similar in terms of the rise of there was Pax Hispania, then Pax Britannia, then Pax Americana, and then he's talking. He thinks eschatologically, and we can edit this out if you need to, but he thinks that that one of the plans was for Israel to take off or to replace but that's coming from his his read on religion. But the idea is still there that it's planned, or that there are people, not that it's going to happen, but that there's a strong enough impetus among some of these historical engineers, power players, to intentionally collapse the American empire. But then there's another power center that they would like to replace it. Of the question, that was originally planned to be China. And
Correct.
You saw that with the Tiananmen Square was a big moment in time, after which the chances of that being the case were decreasing. But I think they had talked so much into it, they had definitely acted like they were in much more control than they were. Like they were trying to project that they had succeeded in penetrating China, where in fact they had not. And because they had kind of made it explicit like the next century was the Chinese century, and they were willing to just collapse the Western or American, Anglo-American, Western European system and be big players and investors. And for them, they don't care. I mean, they're gonna live there. Their kids are gonna be half Chinese. Their grandkids are gonna be fully Chinese. It doesn't matter. It's gonna be
correct.
And who knows to what extent they even care about those things.
You're spot on. This is the book I wrote, Financial Skill Chain. All this goes back to Rome, original Rome. This has been done again and again and again and again. The English-speaking peoples, after Germanic peoples in the last century, it was our turn in this century. It is our turn still in this century, and we haven't come out the other side of that yet. Their intention was to move to China, I worked in China for years as an investment analyst in investment banking and private equity, venture capital. The Chinese decided, no, we're not going to do this again. We're not going to be your host. The same as the Russians did, starting in the early 2000s. Okay. Now, what do they, now they have to collapse the English speaking world. And where are they moved now? Where are they? And I've spoken on this before. Where are they? They've moved to India and Pakistan, because they have the British system. This isn't necessarily British behind it. It's Rome. We're dealing with Rome, modern Rome, how Rome operates and functions, right? Modern virtualized Rome. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. Where they are now, the new host for this is India. And you can already see it. They've already flooded our countries all over with Indians.
Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, the vice president's wife, the rise of the new American Indian. Not, we say dots, not feathers.
Look at the United Kingdom and all the forming all the Commonwealth. They're flooded everywhere. And look here in the United States, they're the CEOs of all of our major companies.
Yeah.
National security, by the way, related companies, and all of many, an increasing amount of our financial institutions, and
in hire all the relatives.
All these positions of government.
Yeah.
We're being recolonized quite literally being recolonized now by the Indians. Why? Because the Russians said no, the Chinese said no. So they're recolonizing us and setting us up for this slaughter where we just kill where our men go demoralized, in disgust, etc., and just go off to just kill because what else you got and you're angry. But what happens in that when you do that, when you kill indiscriminately like that, you eradicate your own numbers, just again like the Germans in 2 world wars. What did that bring Germany? What did that get for Germany?
I would say it got them BDSM, rubber balls, submissive pornography, and dominatrix shit. Not too different from the Japanese with tentacles and
correct.
Now rice. What are they? Grass eaters.
Yeah. So I am, I am. Optimist. I am very much an optimistic person. It's just my nature. Some of us will survive, right? But I have a kid. I got kids, right? I want them to have a future. I don't want to see our people just go off to some great final slaughter for nothing. I don't want to see it. And there's another crazy wild thing that guess what happens if randomly nukes get into certain people's hands? Then maybe we all die. And maybe some of the optimism that, we have about how we're going to survive, et cetera, isn't so well founded. We have over 10,000 nukes on the planet.
Yeah.
10,000.
I think there was an interesting line of thought and, that some American politicians had acquired, like privately acquired or independently acquired nukes. And there's a lot of lore around it. A lot of things are kind of hard to firm up or quantify. But in the hypothetical, with that number of nukes out there and and how human agency works and everything, how many of those, are there 1 or 2 or 3 of those in private hands? And,
Well, people think about nukes on population centers. What about nuke in Yellowstone that breaks the cap on that supervolcano?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. If these people are serious about this mass depopulation, that's how you do it. Right.
Yes. So we're talking about like what is this, like Spectre or Dr. Evil or something?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
This is not a governmental problem. You're talking about like smaller groups of basically madmen.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So
again, not to go dark and not to go all of that, right? Our men are fundamental. A substantive portion of them are fundamentally radicalized, and that's expanding and increasing every day. And we need to pay attention to it, and we need to take it serious. And we need to actually not just talk about solutions. And we need to, and I think, Nick, we said this yesterday, but we really need to look at the men around us and make sure that they're doing okay. And I don't mean touchy-feely woman shit. I mean, do they have a gainful employment, either in their own business or somebody else's? Are they doing okay in their community? Do they have human relationships? Do they have people who are friends with them and talk with them that are, healthy, whole people? We really need to, as a people in all the English-speaking world specifically, we really need to stop right now, and we need to look at the men around us of all ages, by the way. Mm-hmm. And we need to figure out, not because you can ask a man, so as you guys know, you're men, you can ask a man something, he's going to tell you, yeah, I'm good. Right?
Right.
It's true. Doesn't mean he's good. Right?
Right. Doesn't mean he's good.
So we need to really stop, men and women right now. Women are the women's world, right? That's not our world. There's not shit we can do about that, right? Women have got to fix the world of women. But I'm not worried about the world of women. I'm not worried about the crazy violence that might come from that, right? What I am concerned with now, because it's just been directed, now it's been brought so much to the forefront of my attention, is that because it's been directed at me and my family, is that men are not doing good. And when I say not doing good, I mean like sending photos of beheaded kids in response to a photo of you just going out skiing with your kids.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was normal.
Okay, Nick,
You
you're
don't do that?
weird. Yeah, you're weird.
I got a whole portfolio of them ready to go. Like, no, seriously, if that were me, I would be I would be doing what you're doing. I mean, I don't have the same resources you do.
We're figuring out who we've already figured out who they are. We already have their addresses. We already, all of that, right? That's too easy, right? But the point is that that happened at all, right? We are way farther down the path of darkness and way closer to something really horrible that, Xoaquin, to your point, right, that we can't predict, right, that we can't exactly predict because we don't know which conduit or conduits it's going to be flooded down. But we're already there. That, assassination of Charlie Kirk was emboldenment, right? It was emboldenment. We really, as a people, need to stop and take a moment and pay attention to the men around us. And we need to, don't ask them, look and see, are they doing okay? And if they're not, what can we do about that? Maybe we can't do anything. Maybe they're too far gone, et cetera. But then we label and go, okay, well, that one's a threat, right? But we're at the place of 1938, 1939 Germany. We're there. Whether we want to fucking accept it or, allow it to be reality or not. And everything that follows. If we don't stop, which we didn't do in 1938, 39, when there was all the warning signs and all this, all the signals, right? We decided, well, the world will work itself out. How many tens of millions died? 29 million Russians alone died. Right? Something like 70, right? So we're right there. We, not the Germans, we, the English-speaking peoples, are right there where the Germans were in 1938, 1939. And we need to take that serious. And it is the men. And they have been set on this path, again, just like the Germans, starting in the late 1800s, set all that in motion. We're there. And we can't wish that away. And there is nothing more dangerous to humanity than millions of men who have no hope or option in life but violence. And they don't care where it gets pointed or channeled.
Talking about language and ethnicity and language group, which has overlap with, I speak English, but I'm not, we're different, but I see that this is affecting white men that speak English more so than any English speaking people, but we're all in the same culture. So what's going on with Anglo-Saxon sexuality at a deeper level, going back to Protestantism, Puritanism, that that men from, let's say, Mediterranean backgrounds, Latin, etc., sub-Saharan African, aren't having the same problem of finding women or fucking a lot of women? What's going on with the white?
Okay, so this is Rome knowing how to play the Germanic peoples. And I've written on this, I've spoken on this, right? Amongst Germanic peoples, Northwest European and Northern European peoples, we have had for thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years, had to organize ourselves as a polity around winter.
Right. I noticed that you guys hit puberty 2 or 3 years later.
So the way in which we are still physiologically and neurologically wired is all around how do we organize ourselves and conduct ourselves such that we can work together and survive, plan conduct ourselves, produce things, share things, work amongst one another, work out conflicts and struggles and all the normal tensions of humans, because we've had to, for tens of thousands of years, do that every year just to survive winter.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, we value our women far more, substantively far more than all other cultures.
Mm.
We've had to incorporate them into our decisions, our planning, our thoughts, our actions,
so are you saying that can be like manipulated or radicalized or Anglos?
There you go. Correct.
I see.
Correct. So what do? You corrupt the women. You give them artificial status hierarchies that they can survive in.
Because all about flappable, you know what I mean? Like, but I see you guys and your women like you're very like, I love you, babe. Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Right.
So that you can see where the danger is. Yeah. So that extra protection of women and that extra
and status, elevation of status,
elevation,
right?
pedestalization. You're going to survive the winter. Yeah, because you're surviving a winter and she's 7 months pregnant or something, like fuck, right? So you have
correct. Well, and the other piece is that during the winter, you're in a closed, confined space, and you have to find ways to make acceptances for behavior and psychology and put up with shit that you wouldn't normally perhaps put up with if you could get away from that person.
Yeah.
So what happened, and we lost 50 to 60, even with the broader, hips of Northwest European women, we still lost 50% of them in childbirth, 60% really. So we had far less women, which also made them far more valuable to us, far more important to us, right? Which elevated their status. Well, what happens when we're not losing 50, 60% of women, and those women have risen up in all of our artificial, all these artificial financialist status hierarchies.
Right.
It disrupts absolutely everything that we are all still neurologically and physiologically and biologically wired for. Right? Just because we are technologically and societally able to overcome the limitations that forced us to shape, in certain ways, didn't make those ways go away, didn't make the biological wiring, neurological wiring go away. That might take another 10,000 years, quite literally. So what's happening? It means that those who understand these dynamics can hijack these things very easily. And how do you do it? You do it you go after the women. Words. It's all words.
Here. No, I'm saying here, us Romans taking notes. Yes.
There you go, right? Well, you Romans, you got it figured out, right? You Romans know us Germanics very, very, very well, right?
Well, any closing thoughts from you guys? Xoaquin, you go first.
It was a great conversation. Really, I thought it was elucidating. I hope that the audience has also got a lot out of it. Definitely a lot of dangers on the horizon. There's definitely, the control mechanisms which have been used to build the rage and disgruntledness among men in the West is like clearly an operation. It's not a perfect storm. It's not just the result of the natural evolution of communication technology. You can look at these weird projects, like we talk about them sometime, like Jezebel and Salon and these early media projects from 10, 15 years ago that never made money. Billions were sunk into them. They promoted, mansplaining, manspreading, just anti-male rhetoric.
Sex in the City TV show. Yeah.
Just the culture clearly is a social product. It's clearly a contrivance. It's clearly weaponized in the ways that we've been talking about today, and that I think both of us talk about, independently in our own. And so it's cool that we were able to get together also and bounce this off each other.
No, it's a pleasure. You're one of those minds out there that I really actually appreciate hearing, because you're talking truth. actual truth,
Right.
base truth, right? We are in a far more dangerous place than we know, and we need to accept that. And it's not a thing that government can solve. It's not government's fault either, by the way. I mean, yes, there's mechanisms we use, et cetera, but this is something much deeper, much older. This is a societal thing, right? This financialist kill chain has been going on for 2,000 plus years. We are in, and again, I thought we had some more years, but here we are. We are 1938, 1939 Germany, and we don't realize it. And the only way to diffuse that, we can't completely diffuse it. It's 60 years of concerted, all out trillions of dollars invested in getting us here. We can't completely shunt it off, right? Whatever the hell's coming, however it comes, that pressure cooker, right? It's going to pop at some point. But to minimize the extent of it and ensure that we don't destroy ourselves in the cook-off, we need to take time out of our day and make sure that the men that are around us are okay. And if they're not okay in a way that we can't do anything about, or somebody we know can't do anything about, then we quite literally need to look at that person and label them and go, when this cooks off, that one's a threat.
Right.
For no other reason than to just protect our own family. But we're in that place right now. And again, you can't ask the person, you can't, argue, because men aren't going to tell you. Even the healthy men aren't going to tell you, right? So
Right.
We need to be discerning. We need to take a step back, and we need to really spend some time, as much time as we can, talking to the men around us to see where they are. And if there's something we can do to help and assist them to be in a better place in some small way or great, we need to fucking do that.
Yeah. 100%.
We need to stop waiting for government or society to change and all this other. No. We men need to police men. Right? I don't mean police like cops, but we need to look out for each other.
Yeah, wellness check each other, right?
We need wellness and not put up. I've had 10 friends kill themselves in the last 15 years. 10.
Jesus Christ, man. I'm sorry about
I had 2 of them do it in 5 fucking days. Within 5 fucking days, they knew each other, by the way.
During the pandemic, or just over the years?
This is this goes back to
employment.
Yeah, well, most of them were all dealing with having lost in fucking family court. But all of these guys, every single one of these guys had brain injuries from either sports when we were young or from the military. But 9 of the 10 guys all had lost custody battles for their kids in fucking custody court. And virtually every one of them was the better parent.
In the United States?
In the U.S. Yeah, these are all in the U.S.
I didn't do it there. I was not doing it there.
Right.
Sorry to hear it, brother.
No, it's what got me into brain health and brain care and, starting to pay attention to men, et cetera, some years ago.
I lost one friend like that, and I can't imagine losing 10.
Well, it was for me for some years. I had a pistol in literally every night, pistol on the table, bottle of wine for almost 10 years. Right?
Madden.
Well, 8 years, not 10 years.
Well, you and I have had a talk in the background. And I think this is more common than we're ever going to know. And it's a big problem, and it's a problem amongst men you would not guess.
Correct.
Right. That's the thing. It's a silent issue. It's not just, I think there's probably a heavy prevalence with military men who've had to deal with war.
It's also impact sport athletes.
Yeah, from head injuries, perhaps.
Half these guys were never. Well, they had served in the military, but they'd never been in war. It's head injuries. Like 4 of the guys were football players, guys on the team with me in football when we were in high school. It's head injuries. Right. So I'm terribly sorry, guys. I'm going to have to rush here, but we need to stop and talk to the men around us. We need to, we're men. What do we do naturally? We look to the women. Are the women okay?
Right.
Well, we're in a place right now where we need to, the women are fine. They're fine.
Yeah.
They're way more than fine.
Yeah. They're
Way
totally
fucking better than fine.
working
Right?
against their own interest. How good they have.
Correct. We need to take a moment and stop as men and look at the men around us and make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
Right. And if we can do something to get them somewhere, make it a relationship, introduction, conversation, we do that. The ones, though, that there's no saving, which, by the way, are the radicalized ones. You can't de-radicalize people. That's not possible. But the truly radicalized ones, we need to figure that out. And then we need to label that one. That one's a threat. Right.
Right.
Because that's where we are.
Well, I want to thank you guys both for coming on, and EM, quite early for us. Joaquin, quite late for you.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for coming on and having an amazing and quite long conversation. I know this is almost 2 hours long, and every bit of it enjoyable. So hopefully we can do this again and do it soon. Don't forget, everybody, take a look at the description and have the information for both of these guys, how you can find them. Joaquin, you're at New Resistance over on Telegram, among other things. And if somebody looks you up,
my
and
name
use
into
the
Google or wherever, and it's all good.
and they'll use the X, the Joaquin with the X. Is that the easiest way to find you?
Both ways, JX. You'll get different results. It's normally me. There's like some other preacher guy like Joaquin Samuel Flores, but other than that, it's going to be me. That's one cool thing about it is just Google me. I don't need a fucking LinkedIn or anything. You just Google me.
Nice. Look for the tats in the stash. EM, the best place to find you.
The same thing. You can Google me or put me in Grok and it'll come up. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget there is a free algo in the description as well, courtesy of our paid sponsor, algofactory.tech. I built that algo myself. You see me do it. You see me actually use the tools that can be used to connect it to your broker so it can trade without you being there. Once you have optimized it for your trading. Thanks for watching. We're going to do this again soon. See you later.
Take care, guys. Pleasure.
Cheers. All the best.